Guys, alright, so today we're going to talk about some scientific stuff, how it relates to Christianity and the Bible. Mainly the creation of the earth, the creation of the world, and how that relates to Genesis. The point I'm trying to get through today is that Genesis actually agrees with the standard idea of how creation happened. And I'm going to show you how, but first off I want to talk about the Big Bang. That's how most people say, the universe came into being. And I don't think it's contradictory for a Christian to say that God made the world through the Big Bang. To me, that's acceptable. To me, that makes sense because, and that's a big thing about what I'm talking about here today is that God did create the world, but it's all about how did He do it. A lot of people want to believe that He just set it to be, and then it was. He created it out of nothing, and I think He could do that. He could, but I don't think that's how He went about doing it. So first off, I want to talk about the Big Bang, and what I want to talk about here is that He was the cause, in a way, of it. Um, Maybe not that He was the cause of it. That just it's how the universe began anyway. Let's look at three things first off. It's said that the Big Bang has to be three things. It has to be A, uncaused, B, outside or beyond time, and three, immaterial. And this is the cause of the Big Bang. It has to be uncaused because it was the beginning, supposedly, of space, time, and matter. So there can't be infinite causes or even a single cause. It has to just be uncaused. It was the beginning of everything. It's got to be outside or beyond time because Big Bang is what created time and therefore like infinite basically. It's got to be immaterial because it created space. It cannot occupy or be confined by space. And there's a popular video I've seen of I'm not sure what the context of it was. It looked like some kind of debate between atheists and religious scientists. But he had some really good points that saying what created God. That's a big question you get a lot. Nothing created God, and his thing was here's why. Because if you have space, time, and matter, those are continuum that all have to come into existence at one time. Time and matter cannot exist without space, or time and matter cannot exist without space because where would you put it? And matter and space can't exist without time because when would you put it? They all have to happen at the same time. His point was that God, and it's a really good point, is outside of time, space, and matter. He's not limited. He wasn't confined or occupying space. He created them, literally. And the same thing kind of goes for the Big Bang. So to me, you have this cause of what created the universe, and you're saying these things that almost support a creator. It supports God. This cause was always there. It had no beginning. It's infinite, unchanging, and beyond space and time. Combine that with the cause of life, and the author of DNA, and you have almost a scientific description of God. What began has a cause, and God never began, therefore has no cause, because He's called the Alpha and the Omega. And it even says so in the first line of Genesis. This is relevant to everything I'm going to be talking about. Is the first line is in the beginning, time, God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. So that's the whole point of this video today is that Genesis agrees with science and even the 7 days of creation, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's something that always struck me as odd was that there's a theory out there called the steady state theory that means basically like the universe always was and always is going to be. It just is creating and expanding as it's destroying. So as it's growing and expanding, it's destroying other things as they're kind of going out of view. My thing is that if you're or an atheist scientist who's willing to believe the universe always was and is uncaused, why could you not believe in a creator that was uncaused? To me, it's almost the same, and that's why sometimes I'll just refer to God as almost like the source of everything, the source of all life, the source of everything that's made here that we can observe. So getting into this, in the Bible, I'm just going to get just for reference if I need it to look at it. But we have the first day, and to me, I noticed in Genesis and the creation theory that the days and the things were all kind of made in pairs almost. It was kind of a duality to what was going on during creation. And that was on the first day there was light and dark. On the second day there was above and below. On the third day there was sea and land. On the fourth he made the greater light and the lesser light, which most people take to be the sun and the moon. On the fifth he made fish and birds. On the sixth he made animals and man, and on the seventh he rested. So you can see there's kind of like a dual thing going on there. But starting with the first day was light and darkness, and this is kind of going to go through all of creation too, so bear with me. But this is 15 billion years ago. The whole universe started. First thing that started off, that was created after the Big Bang, was light. And that's a heavy thought to think about, because literally everything came from light. And it was, you can read about this. It first existed as a photon, which is a particle of light. When the universe expanded, that light and the photons gained enough energy to decay and then became particles and antiparticles, and that's where you get like antimatter and dark matter. A lot of these particles, I think that they said the ratio was something like for every 10 billion that touched themselves and annihilated themselves, because that's what happens when this stuff touches itself, there was one particle that survived. So everything that we see and that did survive was just a miracle that it even did. So now you had light created, the first thing, and in its absence of light, darkness. So light and darkness was made first. The next day, and that was the end of the first day, light and darkness were made. And what's interesting in that is that not only were light and darkness made, but matter and antimatter were made too. So that even goes with it. On the second day, above and below, and then the firmament. Now this is the creation of the Earth also, about 5 billion years ago. Now those photons that turned into matter, which that's just insane to think about. Like literally matter was created from light. Light became particles, which became gases, which became certain matter. Gravity starts to cause these particles to cluster together into little pockets of gas, and eventually those gases, like hydrogen, would turn into stars through burning processes. And these stars form galaxies, and these galaxies then turn into nebulas and supernovas, and from those supernovas and nebulas, solar systems form. Gas and dust condense, forming new stars from these nebulas, and we have solar systems, like our solar system, for instance. So once all this process happens, you have the universe, star systems, galaxies, and then the Earth, our Earth. So you have above and below. At this point, the Earth is just really barren. It's kind of like the moon, but they're being heated by that radiation left over from the Big Bang. And the sun, it actually melts the Earth. It's so hot that it melts it, and kind of like smelting all the metals and stuff that just so happen to be a part of this Earth. That's important too. The metals that make up the Earth, it all kind of melts and starts to rearrange itself and self-arrange itself till to make a crust, a mantle, and a solid core. But a solid core of iron and an outer core of liquid metal, and it just so happens, by the way, that the Earth had these metals. That's just incredible anyway. And having that solid core of iron and the outer core of liquid metal, it creates a magnetic field, which is the Earth's magnetic field, which shields the Earth actually from certain rays and just certain hazards of space. But now the Earth begins to cool down, and when it does, all this water vapor that was inside during this shifting process comes out during outgassing, and this water, there's some different things about like where did that come from. I didn't pull up on that. I'm going to have to read into that to add that in here later. But it was just in the form of different gases that was in it. And then those started to kind of rearrange themselves during this to make, water, H2O. But once it cools down, all this water starts to come out in the form of like volcanoes and eruptions. So all this acidic water vapor vaporizes due to the heat that the Earth is still experiencing, and it forms clouds. These clouds block UV rays, which then cools down the Earth even more. And from the clouds, this kind of a acidic rain starts to fall, and the condensation cycle begins. So now there is actually an atmosphere, which is the firmament. So in this stage, solar systems were made, our planet was made, and then a firmament was made. So we had the above, the firmament, which divides the two, then the below, and that's the second day. And all this is this is the history of our planet that Genesis is talking about. Now to sea and land and plants, and this is 3.5 billion years ago or so. Alright, now the dense rock from the earth starts to sink down, making ocean basins, and the lighter rock raises up, floating on the kind of molten layer of the crust. And as erosion takes place through the atmosphere now in the condensation cycle, because it's all dependent on each other, the erosion from these mountains comes down, and it turns to sediment. The sediment gets pushed under the landmass so that it pushes it up, so landmass actually starts to form upwards. And Pangaea, which is all land at this point, all continents together in one place, forms, and then the gathering of the water of the seas goes in one place, obviously, into one big ocean called a Panthalassa, I think. So literally you have land in one place and one big ocean in another place. The gathering together of the water of the seas. And then it says, then God said, let the earth bring forth. It doesn't... Yeah, so because it says there, let the waters be formed in one place, and that was Panthalassa, this big giant ocean. Now for the next part, plants. Plants, when it talks about this scientifically, is in the form of like algae, of plant ancestors, basically. An important part about this is that in the Bible, God said, let the earth bring forth. It doesn't say that he created plants in heaven or brand new. He said that he let them come from out of the earth. So what they call protobiotic creation, or even evolution, doesn't contradict science or scripture. It doesn't contradict scripture because even though they were made from the earth seemingly on their own, God said that. He said, let the earth bring it forth. So now we have plants and algae, and this is the big missing step. This is the step that in the ocean somewhere, X happened. Magic happened. Basically, creation of life happened. And the interesting thing about that is to even make a cell, you have to have... It's crazy. To make the enzyme necessary to make DNA, which is at the center of every cell, you need protein, but protein is made with enzymes. It's like... It's impossible. It's hard to even explain. It's trying to build a tool, but in order to build this specific tool, you need the tool that you're trying to build. It's complex. It's perplexing. It is. But somewhere at this point in the ocean, this algae is made via God, basically. Now at this point, there is no ozone layer, but it's still just horrible gases and hazardous kind of chemicals in the air. So anyway, out of this ocean, a single-celled organism that may be responsible for all life as we know it, photosynthesizing prokaryote, the blue-green algae is what it's called. And it's just algae. It's a single-celled algae. It starts taking these toxic gases in the atmosphere, like CO2, and turning them into oxygen, which is what plants do. And because gravity retains oxygen, because the Earth is the perfect size to do this also, retains oxygen because it's heavier and it lets go of hydrogen and other things. It just lets them out in the atmosphere. This is when the atmosphere started to form, the real atmosphere. The O3 layer started to form, basically, the ozone layer. Eventually turns into an ozone layer, which would protect Earth from UV rays, so that it wasn't just getting bombarded with these UV rays and burning up all the time, which is just crazy to think about. This tiny little algae, this little single-celled organism, took the damaging, harmful rays of the sun and actually used those same rays to create oxygen, which would eventually turn to the ozone layer. Let's talk for real. Talk about strength and weakness. This tiny little cell, over billions of years too. This happened. I think it took about a billion years for this to happen. But just algae created the ozone layer. That's to protect the Earth from the sun. That's insane. So we have plant life here in the form of algae before we do actual sea life, which keeps with the theory of evolution too. So